children being raised by a single dad is like about 7 or 8%, which is like almost double of what it was like 15 years ago.
Oh,
So the
wow.
role of dads are taking a more active role, and the percentage of homes where children, we're talking about general population, not foster care,
Right.
is on the increase. That fathers being in the home for many years. When I was going to school, that figure was going down and down and down.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Mediocre Dads. I'm your host, Quan. I go by Q, of course, where being mediocre is a choice and you have to refuse to be mediocre every single day. On this episode of Mediocre Dads, I am joined by a guest who I personally am excited to talk to. I'm excited to talk to all my guests, but this one in particular, he's an older gentleman, but because he's older, he's wiser. And when you're wiser, you have a lot of
We hope.
experiences and wisdom. I'm sure I have no doubt that you have a lot of wisdom to give, especially with the profession that you held previously when you retired from, which is social work. We were kind of talking in bits and pieces before about the good, the bad, and the ugly of social work and the perception of social workers. And he was like, "Hey, let's press record because I got all of it for you in the episode." So I'm excited to have him on. I'm excited for us to get into this conversation, delve into it and have this talk. So before we get into that, hey Lance, can you just go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you, Quan, for having me. My name's Lance Hillsinger. I was a child welfare social worker for 34 years, the first 5 years in Los Angeles County, and then the rest in San Luis Obispo County, which is a county just north of Santa Barbara. Uh, and in most of that assignment, for all but 1 year, I had exclusively court cases of one type or another. So I dealt with kids that were in placement and the parents of those children and the grandparents and the various relatives and the professionals working with the child. So almost all my career was dealing with the court system. I retired from social work on my 60th birthday
Oh,
and had already
congratulations.
worked some on my first book, In Place of the Parent Inside Child Protective Services, because Child Protective Services is, because it's confidential, it's people misunderstand it, there's rumors, and there's all these negative things, or social workers are either, if they're in the media at all, they're either portrayed as very good, as saintly, or very bad. There's usually
Yeah.
one, and the reality is, like most people, we're human. you know we try to do a good job, we try to be proud of our work, but everyone makes mistakes. Any human endeavor is going to have human mistakes,
Yeah.
human error. So one, the book was to educate people about the system. The second was to encourage people to become foster parents or guardian ad litems. Those are two separate things, of course. In some places, some states, think like California, guardian ad litems are called CASA workers. They write an independent report to the court. And the system, a lot of people complain about the system. If we had more foster homes, that would make the system, people say, what could make the system work better? It would have more foster homes. If you have to spend an hour driving to a foster home as opposed to 10 minutes, the system suddenly is more efficient.
Yeah.
Just that in and of itself. It doesn't mean you have to make big structural changes. It's just if we had a sufficient supply of foster homes. And then the third reason I wrote that book was because there were some things, child welfare has changed over my career. There's many things that have been improved, but there's also a lot of things that have gone backwards. And
Yeah.
was always paperwork heavy, but got even more so. And I was spending too much time in front of my computer and not enough time in front of my clients.
Oh,
So
wow.
those are the three reasons I wrote the first book. And then the vast majority of cases that come to juvenile court, the parents are poor enough to qualify for court-appointed counsel. In most states, parents are appointed counsel. There's some states where if you take your kids away, you don't get an attorney to represent you if you're poor.
Yeah.
So if you're arrested for DUI with children, you get an attorney in criminal court, but in juvenile court, you could be on your own in some states. And that I
Oh,
think
wow.
needs to change. Because child neglect, domestic violence, they're more often in communities that are poor. And like I said, most of the kids come from homes that are poor enough to qualify for court-appointed attorneys. I wrote my second book, which is called Build a Better Bridge: Social Policy for the 21st Century, taking a look at the programs that began with war on poverty and what are they doing, what are they not doing, and looking at the larger picture of the American economy. In the early 60s, the United States had something like 40% of the world's world domestic product, you know. Now we're down about 13%. That changes how America
Yeah.
deploys its influence in the world.
Hmm.
There's military influence, but there's, of course, economic influence.
Yes.
So that's why I wrote the second book, because I think we have a lot of issues there um, that need to be addressed. And the government has part of the solutions. Government can be part of that. The social net systems are there. If we didn't have those, occasionally we see people begging on the street. Well, if you didn't have government food stamp programs, you'd see a lot more people begging on the street. So people say, "Oh, so there is a downside to not doing something, government not doing something."
Hmm.
And one of the things that I think focused the connection to your show is so many of the men in my caseload, I hate to say it, there's no other good word, but losers.
Yeah.
They were not successful in life. They were not successful as dads. And why is our society producing so many men that are not capable of economic independence, being a good parent, being a good father? And there's various things I suggest in my book that we can do to make the world a better place. And
Well, that's that. The one I think that's awesome, Lance, for a lot of the things that you've done, and especially the successes of writing your books and what comes with those, and the message that you described that's in those books, and the reason rationale behind writing those books, because it's easy for us to talk about these things, and what I mean by that, right? It's easy to come on a podcast, to be on the news, if you will, and just have these conversations. But what are the actions doing behind those words, you know what I mean? And so many people where I think we have where they fail is the rubber never meets the road, right? Where it's like, oh man, I'm saying I'm having these beliefs or doing these things, but I'm not. There's no action behind that. And not saying that. I just mean in general, right? With these the social programs that you mentioned, right? There's the government plays a part into it, but that other part that makes these social programs successful is the people's willingness to invest into those programs, and then to give some assist and give the time and the effort behind helping those programs grow, right? But if we don't have people having a willingness to do that, will these programs just sit there and they don't do anything, they're not effective, and people complain about them. It's like, why are we putting funds to these programs? And as you mentioned, there would be a lot more individuals who are homeless on the streets versus what we have now, which is not to say we don't have a lot now, but I think the situation could always be worse, And so kind of go back in kind of to the beginning, where you mentioned if we just had more foster homes. And so, well, before we get into the foster homes, I want to ask, because we are kind of talking about, but the stigma behind social work, right? So like there's either the positive stigma or the negative stigma, and especially when you're the social work, when dealing with young children or adolescent children, there's always seems to be a negative stigma with social workers, because they're like, oh, you're just here to take my kids, or you're just here to judge me, to determine if I'm a good parent or not, rather than actually help me. So you're not here to help me. You're just here to hinder my ability to whether or not to be a parent, or to determine you don't like me, so you're here to take my kids from me. So like with that stigma, I'm sure that you experienced that yourself. Was that a challenge being a social, or was that not as prominent?
no, sometimes you would encounter that. And again, because had mostly court cases, sometimes we have court cases where the child's in the home, but under court supervision. And sometimes the parent, well, you guys are just going to take my kids, or what are you really helping? I would tell people, if you're doing well, I have a very easy court report to write. If you
Yeah.
mess up, I have to work really hard because I have to document how you've messed up. So it's in my interest for you to do well.
Yeah.
And that seemed to go over with people. Okay, I got that. Um, you know, uh,
But what does
and
doing
I
well
think
look
that,
like though?
well, that means like if a child's in foster care, the parents have a case plan. Normally, in some states, we in San Luis Obispo County, we started at the very first hearing, but legally it starts at the dispositional hearing, which is about 6 weeks out. In California, how much varies by state. It says, okay, this is your case plan. You're supposed to go to AA. You're supposed to go to parenting classes or whatever. You're supposed to cooperate with home visits. And some people, they don't go to their classes or they don't go to their drug testing that they're supposed to. And
Mm,
then that's what. So if people are
gotcha.
not doing that, in order to, and the child's at risk, there's presumption that if they're not following their case plan, the child's at risk. You have to document. There's a lot more documentation. If you write a report, you know, uh, Jane Smith made 28 AA meetings in the 30 days in a month, and she's working and she's doing this. It's very easy to write a report, very easy to write a good report about
Yeah.
things. So it's a lot more work because you have to document. If you're going to remove a child from the home, there's a lot of documentation, there's a lot of things. And so it's in the social worker's interest to keep the child at home if you just want to think about self-interest.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, I think that's the point. Yeah, there.
Oh, okay. And so does it seem to get, because you were in social work for many years, and so is there, did you ever get the feeling of just it was you became too calloused, if you know what I mean, where it's just like you don't have any more empathy to give or sympathy to give to families and certain issues because you've seen it before, and you've heard it all before, and in some range or some facet where it's like, man, I've heard this or this, I heard this before. I've seen this before. And, while I hope, this individual, this parent or whatever the case might be has a willingness to change, is going to take the steps to change. It's probably was there ever a callous that, and it's not to say you just didn't feel bad for people anymore, but this callous because it's just so many negative experiences or positive
Or a
experiences.
little jaded about things. Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I would be lying if there were days where I felt the well was about to run dry. And that's part of the reason I think I retired, because it was kind of getting to that point where not so much I had seen it all, but because the paperwork end
Yeah.
was getting so overwhelming and so bureaucratic. There has to be a certain level of bureaucracy. You have to have monitoring, things like that. You just can't have, but it got to be so, and I talk a little bit in the details of the book, even something as simple as transferring it. In California, we have Medi-Cal, which
Yep.
is California versions of Medicaid, and it's administered at the county level. So if a child goes to a foster home in another county, maybe a place with the grandma in another county, normally you would transfer the case. But now there's all this paperwork, just a simple bureaucratic task that you're supposed to have a meeting and document the meeting, which is insane because
Yeah.
that's such a normal, ordinary function. It's a no-brainer kind of thing. Okay, the child's moved to grandma. We need to transfer the Medi-Cal case to that county, not the legal case, and just that kind of thing is going to discourage you. And that's what I want to push back to the system and say, hey, let social workers do the job. They came into the profession because they want to help people, not fill out forms.
Yeah. And I think I agree, in a lot of ways, a lot of bureaucracy behind it, meaning there's so much, while their intention behind their decision making might be is to help. And so they're like, hey, we're adding these things because we've seen so many cases or whatever, or statistics to show that if we do this thing, if we add this thing, then that's only going to help the parents, and the kids, in which our end state is obviously to help the parents and the kids, not realizing the people that you need to enforce that are your social workers, more or less, but that's only making their jobs harder and making them less effective because you mentioned it in the beginning. If I'm doing more of my job from behind a computer, how effective am I actually to being helping determining whether or not these parents are a good fit, or these parents are doing what they're supposed to, whatever the case they might be or whatever, and the children are actually receiving the care that they need. I think it's so important that if we want to empower social workers, we want to utilize social workers in the way of, hey, go help families, make sure be the helpful tools in which you train to be. Let them almost get them out there, don't have them in the office. So Very interesting. Very, I do definitely agree because we have a similar thing in the where with my job specifically, if I want to talk, if I need something done, right, if I'm trying to figure something out, whatever the case might be, you know, so many people nowadays they like to send emails or like to make phone calls, but the best way and the proven way for me is has always been no, get up from behind your desk and go talk to that person because you're going to get more out of that from going face to face rather than that email or that phone call. Yeah, it might be more direct. Yeah, you might get the answer that you need more quickly and more accessible, and you don't have to leave your office, if you will, but the interaction that you have will help build a rapport and a relationship with that person, and now you have a person or that you can always lean on or rely on. And one of the reasons my soldiers ask me why I'm so successful, if you will, in and why I know so many people is because I'm always willing to go to talk to people. I always just want to go talk to people. I don't want to send an email. I don't want to be behind my computer. I don't want to be making a phone call all the time. I want to go talking to these people and figuring out what's going on because I learn a lot more from that personal interconnection rather than with you. And again, I understand this. We kind of talked about the stigma of social working, but again, some others have different, different experiences. But one of the things you mentioned in the beginning was we need more foster homes in what does that look like, right? Because when someone thinks of foster home, they think of, oh, I'm going to have these potentially five plus kids in my home and at any given time, and I'm essentially helping raise them until they're either removed from the home or they're 18 and they can finally leave my home or whatever the case might be.
Let me just go back to your comment about meeting people. I understand that some of the tech firms have done the architecture of their office so that the pedestrian flow increases physical contact so that they pass each other and so that they
Right.
increase that contact and that creativity and that's just designed into how to do that. And just a quick comment here. I've been a long time where there's fax machines were common. And of course, fax machines, the paper won't work or they're jammed or they're busy all the time or there's something. And a lot of times I would say, just mail it. Just mail it. Or, our local mail delivery would only take 2 days unless it's urgent. Just
Yeah.
mail it. You don't have to spend 10 minutes fussing with the fax machine. Just put it in an envelope and the county puts a stamp on it.
Mm.
But to get back to your question about what foster parents look like, well, they are um, they come into kind of two types. Okay, well, I should back up. Just about half children that are placed in foster care are placed with relatives. We
Okay.
still call it foster care because they get foster care money, but it's
Got
a
you.
relative placement in
Okay.
the foster care system.
I didn't know that.
So they get paid as if they're foster parents. There's a court decision that's now 40, 50 years old, Yoakum versus Miller, that says the government shall pay relative caretakers as if they were foster parents.
Mm.
And some people will say, well, I would care for my grandchild without any money or whatever. Most of the families we deal with, even the relatives are relatively poor. That money is critically needed.
Yeah.
So, and for the few families that were alpha, we'd say start the college fund, but take the money that the child's entitled to. So, but to talk about the non-relative foster care placements, they come in two varieties. One is short term, which in California we go by this horrible term that we call shelter care. And it's my
Mm.
personal thing that we have to find a different term by it because it's shelter care implies some sort of like Red Cross facility or something.
Right.
But that's a type of foster home that's available on immediate notice. The social worker can call 2 o'clock in the morning and say, okay, I'm bringing Johnny by, and we know that you have a vacancy. I'm just telling you, I'm 30 minutes away. And those people, those foster homes generally are short term because we don't know 2 o'clock in the morning whether grandma could take the children or not. So maybe in another county, we may not be able to reach her. We need to run a background check on grandma and grandpa and everybody else that's in the home and make sure the home's safe. So there's time to make sure that the relative it can be a suitable home. Sometimes that can be done immediately, and sometimes it takes a few days, depending on distance and just communication and scheduling. So that's the one type of foster home shelter care. They're going to care for those kids for days, weeks, few months. Then the other type is foster homes that are going to care for long term. And the goal in that is still reunification. The vast majority of cases are not severe enough. There's a code section that talks about the severity when this doesn't apply, but most of the time, parents will get a chance to reunify with their children. So that the foster home is considered a transitional place where there might be for months. And then sometimes, of course, that doesn't occur.
Yeah.
So, we would like adoption, is considered the most permanent plan if the parent's not successful. And it's successful, San Luis Obispo, we were about 60% of the time. We were a little more successful than other counties, but not hugely more. And certainly
Mhm.
we didn't bat 1,000 because you wouldn't want that because you taking too much risk sending the kids. So you know that sometimes when you see kids sent back home, a certain percentage is not going to be successful. You just Some people will relapse on drugs. We would like that to be zero, but nobody has a crystal ball. And I digress briefly, but roughly 2/3 of the cases that come into foster care system, the children, are due to neglect related to substance abuse. There might be other issues too, but that's the most common issue.
Man, that's so unfortunate.
And then sort of those foster homes that are providing longer term, not few days or a week or so or a couple of weeks, they kind of branch out in two types: county run homes and contract foster family agency homes. Um, in some counties, communities, almost all is contracted out with agencies. In other counties, like San Luis Obispo, we have some that are state licensed, or California, it's done at county level. Some states it's at state level that are state homes, and others that are contracted with like Family Connect for Seneca or some of the others. Just a quick aside, there's been a thing about the news in some states, and I just learned this recently because I thought it applied to all the states, but where children have been placed in group homes, that's another type of foster care placement, a very small number of kids are placed in group homes, that they can be run for profit. In California, not. You can't run a group home for children for profit in California. The
Okay.
federal government allows that. And some states have placed kids where they have not been taken care of properly in for-profit facilities. And the large group homes that you kind of see like a Dickens, they're few and far between now. They're usually small group homes that are like licensed for 6 children. And so um, they blend into the regular neighborhood. They try to be uh, a family setting as much as possible. So they're these small family group homes.
Yeah.
So those are the types of foster homes or types of placements they have. And we asked earlier, what happens when they turn 18? In most states now, they have what calls extended foster care. So as long as the kid who was previously a foster child is now a young adult, as long as they go to school or work or a combination of the two, they can get an allotment and maintain in their placement. That could be their own apartment, or that could be in the home of the relative or a foster home.
Oh wow, that's awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, um, so this topic is it hits home for me. So I was me and my twin brother were adopted when we were 2 years old, um, and I have an older brother who was also adopted. He was adopted later on, but he was about we he was about 12 when my parents adopted him. But very fortunate, very blessed for me and my brother, especially me, twins, 2 year old twins, right, to be adopted together. It was very fortunate and very blessed for us for that. And then to have for my parents to still want to have more kids, they adopted my older brother, and when he was 12, and you've dealt with kids who are living in group homes on and off or whatever the case might be, and that was my older brother, where he was in and out of group homes. Was going back to his mom's home, but there were substance issues and all these different concerns and issues that she was having that was causing him to have to go back into the group home, into the system where it was like, hey, you need to be, where you're waiting for you to be adopted at this point because you can no longer go live with your mom.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, and it's one of these things that lives in my, but I remember the day we we went to pick up my brother and from the group home that, and we we were living in Las Vegas at the time. So I'm originally born in and we were living in Vegas at the time. We went to the group home in which he was staying, and I remember walking into this house, and it was, it was a 2-story home, and there's all these kids hiding upstairs, and then my brother, or the person who was going to soon take on the role and the responsibility of my brother, comes down the stairs, and where my parents are talking to him, and they've already spoken to him a few times, right? This is not just like a, hey, that house, we're gonna pick him up. And I know this, of course, but we pick him up, and I remember, on the TV is Dragon Ball Z. They have a pool in the backyard, and it's a dirty pool. I'm talking like the pool's green, but it's winter I think it was a winter time in Las Vegas, so it's kind of like, yeah, the pool's green now, but in springtime gets cleaned up, good to go, and it puts some chlorine in there, and the pool's as good as new, right? So nothing to not to bash the pool and the cleanliness of the pool, but that's just something that stuck out to me, and I remember thinking to myself, like, wow, like this looks like the home in which we growing up in now, but still, like, there's people upstairs that I don't know. Right. There's people upstairs. There was, young boys, young men up there that I don't know. And like, are they mean? Are they nice? Is my brother mean? Is my brother nice? What is his life been like? Is he just going to be, are we going to have to like walk on eggshells around him? Like just uncertainty. Cause you don't know where this situation, which is coming from, right? Like you're giving this brief interaction within the home, and you have to make an assumption like this is going to be really good or this is going to be really bad, so it was different. It was a weird experience, you know what I mean? But I was thinking at it from a young kid's perspective, not from my brother's perspective. So now fast forward to me now, and I've talked to several people about this, foster home and group homes and whatever the case might be. And I have to imagine what my brother's experience was like, whether I don't know ultimately know if it was good or bad, but still meeting us for the first time, this idea of meeting us and saying like, this is now who is my family, and in a way, right? But he's been told that before, of like, hey, this is your temporary family, and this is who you're going to live with for a little bit. But it's like, did he believe like it was going to be permanent, or did he think like, no, they're just going to try to get rid of me, or I'm going to do one wrong thing? It's just uncertainty behind all these things, especially within that, depending how you grew up, but I could tell, later on now, I was like, he was very uncertain on like, man, if I make one wrong move, they're just going to want to get rid of me. I'm not a good kid. I've made mistakes, but they're going to want to get rid of me. So with you and working, and that's just my story. And I tell that story because, like I said, this topic is near dear to my heart. Because again, myself and my brother, it means a lot to kind of see the development that these kids make from when they're first adopted, if they're fortunate enough to be adopted, to where they are now. But for you, and that being the social worker, from that perspective, where you take these kids and you kind of place them in the home, whether it's temporary or long term. What have you noticed with these young kids? Is it all negativity? I understand it's not, obviously not a positive thing to be removed from your home if you have to, but are there kids that have good positive attitudes of like, it is what it is, I'm going to make the most of it? Or is it just, no one wants me, this is my fault, and this sucks?
It's sort of a mixed bag. Each kid has a unique experience. I think a lot has to do with the foster parent. I think the brand new novice foster parents are a little bit surprised sometimes. And I think the system's done a better job of preparing them when the child isn't particularly grateful.
Yeah.
Here, look, we went through all these classes, we went through all this paperwork, we went through this, we jumped through all these hoops to get our foster parent license, and we open our, we love you very much, we want you, and the kid's like, not expressing any, he doesn't have any attitude, but like you said, is this going to be temporary? Am I really part of the family? And, I think about like, if I was like in fifth grade and suddenly removed from my home and placed in with one of my friends from schools with their families, there were kids I liked better than I didn't like. For instance, some families have oatmeal for breakfast. I have one father complain that his kid wasn't getting hot oatmeal for breakfast in the foster home. Well, I personally don't like oatmeal. I would hate a foster family that would want an oatmeal. So, we all those little things that are who we are, and it's very hard for kids to adapt. And I think the system, ideally, we would like to be able to match the kind of personalities. Is like I remember one family, one relative, an aunt, her own kids were very involved with Little League, and she wound up getting four of her nephews and nieces placed with them, and okay, we'll get so and so, the oldest boy, we'll get him into Little League. Well, he was already 12 years old. He had never played organized sports. He would not be good on playing Little League because
No.
he would be the kid that would drop the ball. I said, please don't do that. He's going to be the kid who loses the game.
Yeah.
He does not want that on him. And the aunt, to her credit, got it. So he would just come to the game. He would, go to the concession stand. He had fun at the games, but just watching, because by age 12, 13, kids who've been playing Little League for 5, 6 years, they're pretty good. And
Yeah.
he'd never played. And so, I did want him the experience of being the kid that drops the ball. And I think, the number of children, the system was kind of placing kids too many, about roughly 400,000 kids enter foster care every year. Now they
That's a big
exit
number.
too. They go back home. They go to the other parent, very often the father. So that doesn't mean there's 400,000 kids in foster care forever and ever. There's
Right.
they're exited from foster care one way or the other. So and that figure has been declining. I think that's good. I think the system's gotten better, but also the function is with the shortage of foster homes, it has to affect decision making. Maybe not consciously, but it has to affect decision making. Like, if we remove this kid from this home, the only foster home I have is 50 miles away. Or I write in the book a situation where it's 4 children. Well, they definitely had to be removed. The parents had a very severe drug problem. They were initially placed 4 together. That didn't work for a variety of reasons. And we had to place the boys one direction, 50 miles one direction, and the girls 50 miles another. The siblings were 100 miles apart because there were no foster homes available to take 4 kids.
Wow.
But I want to kind of talk about the larger issues, why we have fathers who are not taking these kids. I mean, it took
Yeah.
two to have the kids.
Hmm.
And I read an interesting statistic that I was glad to know in preparing for the show. The number of children being raised by a single dad is like about 7 or 8%, which is like almost double of what it was like 15 years ago.
Oh
So the
wow.
role of dads are taking a more active role, and the percentage of homes where children, we're talking about general population, not foster care,
Right.
is on the increase. That fathers being in the home for many years. When I was going to school, that figure was going down and down and down, and I was going to cite that, and then I think I better check the statistics, and I found it's actually been going up the last couple of years, and that's good. But like I said, a lot of my fathers in my caseload, they weren't very successful, not just as fathers, but in general. And our society has to do something about that. And if I could just talk a little bit about one little aspect of the welfare system
Oh
that
yeah,
I think
absolutely.
that should be changed. Let's imagine a woman on welfare. She 2 children by 2 different men. One guy, he's got a pretty good job, and he pays child support just regular, or taken out of his paycheck. The other father's not doing so hot, from time to time, and so the mom's on welfare. If that guy's marginally employed, anything that he makes, any child support, the child select garnished from his wages, doesn't go to the mom, doesn't go to the child. It goes back to Uncle Sam. And
Oh wow.
superficially, though, okay, that's taxpayer money going to the mom. If we can get get something from the blood from the stone, and let's reimbursement. That sounds good. On the other hand, that doesn't make the dad invested.
Hmm.
If he sees his money going to his child, if whatever he's garnished goes to his as a supplement to the, just like the other fathers, child support is helping the mother out. He's going to be more motivated to be involved, to be part of the mainstream society, to have a regular job. If he sees, hey, 30% of my paycheck is taken anyways, I'm gonna work under the table because that's the only way I can survive.
Yeah.
And he's gonna have a better relationship. So I think the system is penny wise and pound foolish, going after the the absent father for the child support to reimburse the government. That money should go to the mother, or mother on behalf of the children. And I think we will see great gains if that. If I can make one change in the system, I think that would help her out of poverty, because if she's on welfare, she's living at the poverty level. A couple $100 when you're on welfare is really helpful. If you're
Yeah.
making $100,000 a year, a couple $100 is nice, but it's not make or break.
Mm-hmm.
That would be one change I would want to make in the system.
Well, so to in a way just kind of push back, I guess, is so even if that individual is paying, they're paying that money, but it's going to Uncle Sam. Is that ultimately going to fix the bigger issue, the core issue at hand, which I think is, obviously child support, some of the purpose behind child support was supposed to be, hey, you're going to supplement the cost that you would equally both be making if you were still married, or you both were in a still relationship, supporting your child. But now this
Mhm.
one parent has sole custody, and you are now supplementing some of those costs to pay for what your portion of the responsibility, or what the government determines your responsibility of child. But do you think, by even if you say, hey, okay, we're not going to pay, it's not going to go to Uncle Sam, it's going to go to the mom, or to help pay for the still child support, for the money for the child, is that going to fix the core issue of dad wanting to be involved in son or daughter's life?
I think it raises, of course, it's not going to fix it 100% of the time,
Sure,
but it's going to
100%.
raise the probability. It's going to raise the probability a lot, and it's going to make the child have a better appreciation of the father.
Mm-hmm.
And then he will, it just will make for a better. Uh, the mother will feel better about the dad. It'll make visitation by him nicer. It will make things easier all around for the family, not just economically, but psychologically.
Yeah.
And people will say, oh, the government's going to lose all this money. I looked and looked and looked and looked. I could not find any government pie chart where it says where we get I could find how much the state of California collected in fishing license, but I could not find how much it collected in child support to offset, or federal government, those things. I mean, it's just that insignificant amount of money. And it's not going to, if we suddenly make this change, run up the federal deficit anymore.
Oh, I
It'd
mean,
be
that number is
actually
ridiculous
it'll
anyway.
help
So
because that father will be more likely to be part of mainstream society, paying taxes, and so if anything, it'll be a positive to the federal balance sheet.
yeah, because you want to encourage, growth, persuade, downslope, if you will, because, and I in a lot of ways I do agree, right? If you incentivization works, right, and we can incentivize, especially the father who's the one paying the child support, incentivize the father by saying, a little bit more, to saying, hey, your money is going towards the cause in which you're supposed to be paying for, so obviously, now there's an investment behind that. There's, your money's going towards, it's working, for you rather than against you in a way, because you're seeing that your kid or kids are being taken care of. So I do get you, and I do understand, in a lot of ways, and what you mean. So you did make a comment in the beginning. You said, so a lot of these dads are losers, though, and so are these, in your experience, right? And I know we're not necessarily trying to be overly demeaning in any way, but in all reality, I do think there are a lot of dads, and I hate to call them dads, who losers, right? They negate their responsibilities. They don't think that they are responsible, or they should have to pay or participate in that child's life, even though, like you said, it takes two to make a baby, and they had no problem participating in the act to making the kid. But now when it comes to the responsibility of being a parent or taking care of that kid in whatever aspect you can, you want no part in it. And it, it hurts me, and it irritates me when fathers don't do that. Because I think being a dad is one of the greatest. I can do anything. I can be super successful in the army. I could be super successful with my podcast. I could be super successful within, educationally, right? But all those accomplishments or don't mean anything for me, especially unless I'm doing it for my kids, and my kids reap the reward of those things, right? Getting a promotion in my job means something to me because that means I have more money to do things with my kids and my wife. Earning a degree, or my third degree, means something to me because my kids are proud of me when they see that, and they see that education is valuable and has a value, rather than just you tell me go to school and you don't do any school yourself, or whatever the case might be. But my kids bring value, or make the things my accomplishments valuable, because I'm doing them for me, not for them. And that's me, though. All dads, but that's why it kind of irritates me, is when dads don't want to acknowledge or want any role or any part in that. The hard part is sometimes dads they get a bad rap, and then they're the ones who are pointed as to be the bad guys, when in all reality it takes two to tango, and both are not both parties had their through their jabs or said their words or had their part to play in that relationship, but one is seen as to hold more value than the other, which in most cases in which I've seen is the woman in the mother is seen to hold more value than the father, and the father's like never gets a chance. So within your profession as social, do you get, or have you seen or experienced, can almost speak on one side to say, hey, well, this is my what I've seen, that this is what's actually.
Well, I wish that I could find a professional sounding term that would be better than the word loser. I,
No,
I've
yeah.
used that in other podcasts, but I cannot. I have struggled, but I cannot find a word that sounds professional that conveys the same meaning. As I write in my first book, In Place of the Parent, I was fortunate. I grew up with my dad and mom and an intact family. My dad was very involved with my life, YMCA, and things like that. And so you're right. I can't imagine not being that kind of dad. Now, part of it is if you haven't had that experience, it's harder. If you haven't had somebody to model that for you.
Yeah.
Um, it's also harder if you're struggling economically. And I often think that, when you see that homeless person, and it's usually a man that's on the street corner, that you think, well, he's looking for money for beer, maybe, or whatever, but he probably has children somewhere. What caused that guy to fall that far down that he's living literally under the bridge?
Yeah.
And we have an increase in that in society, in part because housing's so expensive.
Yeah.
Um, and what is our society doing or not failing to do because guys are not being successful? And part of it is education. Is that boys drop out of school much more frequently than girls, particularly African American boys, more so than Hispanic or white boys in general. In some school districts, the dropout rate in general, all genders, um, is about 25%. That's horrible.
Wow.
But and then if the boy who doesn't graduate or just fails to graduate high school, he's more likely to drop into a criminal lifestyle. His failure to graduate becomes a matter of public safety. The young woman who fails to graduate high school, she's more likely to become dependent upon, get pregnant early, and become dependent on government aid of one form or another. Now that's bad. That's bad from an economic sense, but the fellow who's a danger to public safety because he failed to graduate, that's a greater society. That's not just a money issue. That's the greater loss.
Yeah.
And what can we do to get more boys to graduate school? I think that's starting to be an issue here talked about in other places. One is I think school districts should identify graduation rates by gender.
Okay.
Most school districts these days have websites that say, okay, here's our campuses and here's our faculty, and this is our school calendar, and this is the lunchroom, this is what they're serving to lunch, this cafeteria this week. But have that posted as part of as a requirement. Most school districts get for money. Shows the problem, shows the disparity, because first you have to identify one of the things in social work is you have to identify the problem before you can solve it. Duh.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's one thing we could do. The other thing is I think that the percentage of male teachers is declining. And so there needs to be a campaign, an awareness to encourage men to go into the teaching field. There've always been a very small number of uh, men in elementary and junior high, but even the high school level, that is starting to decrease.
Yeah.
And I was on a other podcast show, and I said this, and I says, yeah, the host said, yeah, of course, yeah, I hardly have any male teachers on when I was in high school, and that's sad because boys will be more successful if they have role model there. And this is also a little minor point, but one of the things I've learned in writing books is that fiction kind of dominates the field. It is much more lucrative than the nonfiction half of writing,
Yeah.
and roughly 80% of book fiction books are bought by women. Women like to read fiction much more than men.
Mhm.
But what do we do in high school? You usually have 4 years of English, and almost all of it is fiction. You might have
Mhm.
occasional, Diary of Anne Frank or something, but that's not going to hold point. So I think we should have at least 1 year of nonfiction writing because that's the writing that a person will need in a job.
Yeah.
Whatever job they have, that's that they need to be able to write in a clear way to tell the nonfiction story, not this creative writing stuff, but the journalism like a Stein. And journalism in most schools is just selective, but we should have as a requirement 1 year of nonfiction. I think that alone will help more boys graduate.
I agree because I think one of the the issues is for kind of in general, speaking generalized, but like for the success of especially of young men, but even young women as well, whether they're young kids all the way up to adolescence and then into adulthood, and what you see more and more is kids are not graduating because I don't think the value that graduating high school once had or once held no longer holds any value. And so it's kind of like, even if I graduate high school, you're telling me to bring value to the society or to make any money and a profit and to be successful in my own way, I still have to go to college. And then even when I go to college, I'm in this world of debt that I'm always paying back. And then there never seems to be an end to the rat race, if you will. And I know they're not thinking from the perspective of, oh, it's the rat race, but it's the perspective of, if that's what I have to look forward to, why even try to play that game when everyone who's older than me has played that game, and most of them that I know have lost, if you will, and metaphorically lost, and they've found success by doing some maybe this illegal activities or thing else that's not that's different outside of the norm, if you will. So what's the incentive to do it rather than just go do something else? You know what I mean? And I say that because even when I was in high school, I almost didn't graduate. Senior year, junior year, senior year, or maybe the senior year, I was just I was a bad kid. I'll just be very frank. I was a bad kid, and I had my parents, I had my family, but like I was just a kid. I was acting out. I had convinced myself that I was stupid, and because I had convinced myself that I was stupid, I didn't have any confidence that regardless of who was teaching me, that I could learn what they were telling me. And so then now I'm at this point in my life where it's like, I'm not smart enough to go to college. I was barely smart enough to finish high school. I'm not gonna go force myself to go be in a school again, and then where I struggle and it's hard, and then I made fun of or I fail. So I joined the military, and it's one of the best things that I ever did. But still, the education was, if I didn't have the education that I got in middle school, which was, or in elementary and middle school, which was a charter school, would not have been. I don't think I would have made it to the point I did in high school, where by the time I made it to the point where it's like, oh, I'm really stupid. I shouldn't. I'm failing. Right. I was. It was more or less, I'm going to graduate. I just got to do the bare minimum, and I was good to go. Uh, and I joined the military afterwards, or whatever the case might be. But me joining the military and telling myself I was stupid, now I'm almost 30 years old. And I don't say this to brag, but I do say this because I do feel a sense of accomplishment behind it. Um, I have associate's degree. I have a bachelor's degree. I'm finishing my second bachelor's degree currently, and I'll start my master's degree sometime. And I had told myself I was stupid. I didn't have any male figure. I didn't have a lot of male figures telling me like, "Hey, no, you can do it. You just got to sit down and grind it out," or showing me what that looks like, as you mentioned, because we don't have a lot of males in education. And so it was very hard to see myself, a future self, successful when I didn't see it in front of me. And so I say all that to say because I agree with you, and I understand the step behind it, because I know again, I've been there, I've seen that, and I think for young men especially, oh man, for young men especially, I think, man, the power that of having a mentor, especially at a young age, is wonderful, especially a positive mentor, right? I think it's called Big Brother. I'm in Texas. I think it's what's called the Big Brother program. I think it's nationwide, but I think that's what the program is called. And essentially, you can become a mentor, Big Brother, Big Sister type.
That's right.
And I think it's awesome because I tell my soldiers like, hey, you know, if you're not doing anything and if you want something of value, especially volunteer hours for us in the military, I said look into this program, right? Because these young kids need mentors, and by you playing basketball with them, by going to the library with them, by you just having a conversation with them, they want to learn from you. They want someone to learn from. That they can see and look at and be like, yo, like you are the epitome of what success looks like. You're fit, you're smart because you're in military intelligence in the military, and you have a family, you have a car, you have all these things that they see that they would like for themselves, and so you're an image of what potential success looks like. And so I tell my soldiers, like, by you spending just a little bit of time with these kids, it helps increase their confidence just that much, and it gives them that drive and that motivation to want to continue, to want to graduate high school, to want to take a stab at potentially going to college, or even potentially joining the military and see what that future looks like. So it's very impactful. I think we have to be very impactful. We just doubt ourselves, and like I doubted myself, and we say like, well,
Well, as you were talking, I recalled when I was worked in Long Beach. I worked in North Long Beach, which is a relatively poor area,
mhm.
and they had this huge billboard sign that was supposed to be inspirational that said "Life is hard." And I would drive by that just because of the traffic patterns fairly frequently. And I think that just discourages people, you know? Life is
Yeah,
hard. Why? Just, yeah, if life's hard, why don't I get high? So it won't be
yeah,
hard, at least for that day. So I know, and I think, where I live in San Luis Obispo, housing is extremely expensive. We're as bad as San Francisco because the prices aren't as bad, but the wages are lower,
yeah.
high compared to like Tennessee or Kentucky, but they're still not anywhere near what it would take. And my own daughters, my own adult children, okay, you know, we're only going to get a house when you die, Dad. That's the reality. And so I think a lot of people just like, why make the effort because it doesn't pay off. And a lot of people, the conservatives will say, work hard, and it's all about, people don't have work ethic. I think there's some truth to that, but I also draw this analogy here in San Luis Obispo. We have municipal. We're very heavily dependent on tourism. There's municipal parking lots. There used to be lots of parking lot attendants. You pay your parking fee. Now it's nearly an automated system. Well, you could have been the city's best, hardest working, most cooperative parking lot attendant, but now your job's been automated out.
Mhm.
And if you know that your job is going to be automated out in 6 months or a year, why work hard? And I think you speak about that. Why does you have to have a meaning of life? For you, the meaning has been your military service, and that's great. traditionally, like before my generation, I mean, way back, that many kids in foster care did enter military service. I had some that were interested, but no one never followed through with it. I didn't think any of them were really ready, to be honest about it. So I'm kind of glad they decided not to. But
Yeah.
um, so yes, I think you speak about something. And then another thing that came across is that some study they found that if there was an African American uh, man in elementary school, the chances of African American boys graduating in high school, not necessarily were the teachers, just in the school, was increased by 15%,
Wow.
just because they had that role model. And it was just like I said, not even because they were the teacher, they were just a teacher that they saw around the school.
Hmm.
So I think that's one of the things that we need to do as society is encourage men to be back when they were teachers, and other things that will encourage boys to be more successful. One of the things that the bugaboo that I have that is food stamps. Most people think, okay, food stamps. We don't want anybody to die of malnutrition in America. That's awful. Okay,
Hmm.
um, and rough just under 10% of food stamps go to elderly people. People think of food stamps as always for these young loafers or something. No, that's not. Just under 10% go to seniors. Um,
Oh, wow.
but it's calculated by household size and income. That sounds perfectly logical. The only thing is, teens, particularly teen boys, need more calories.
Yes.
So we should program the computers to give, if you have teens in the home, you get a certain percent, you'll get 15, 20% extra in your food stamps because that's just going to keep that kid. I don't know. I get irritable when I skip meals, you
Hmm.
know, and the lines at the food banks, business booms at the end of the month. Now, the government has done a good thing. I don't know if that's true nationwide or just in California. Food stamps used to be everybody got their stamps on the first of the month, not physical stamps, but they got the allocation first of the
Right.
month. Now they go to a rolling system. So, like if you apply it on the 10th, every 10th you get food stamps. So that has evened out things a little bit. So that's one thing this government's doing better. We can always
Gotcha.
trash, oh, government could do this better. I think we should recognize one of the things as social workers, when somebody does something right, you ought to recognize it. So that's one of the
Yeah.
things that I think we should recognize. The government's decided, hey, having everyone get their food stamps on the same day doesn't make sense. Let's have it spread out through the month. So that's
100%. Let's make it
celebrate
make
that small victory.
sense. Yeah, make it make sense. And again, like you said, I think we should celebrate just like our kids, celebrating their small victories to us, but big victories to them, right? And so what I think, how I look at it is, the government, even whether it's county or city, state, right, wide, or even nationwide, right? They'll pass laws and whatever the case might be, and you may not see the direct impact in your local neighborhood or your local county, your municipality, right? But like someone's benefiting from it, and we should be able to say, acknowledge, like, hey, that's what that was. That was a good program that was implemented. Overall, right? Versus just always wanting to bash and trash. They there's a good portion of them that are helping they're helping somebody, and that person or that family they're benefiting from those programs. They're doing better than they were. Now it's
And
not.
and I okay, right.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, if you go to the DMV, you want that transaction to be done as efficiently as possible. I don't want to wait in line. I want to get my license or my sticker or whatever it is. I want the DMV employee to be almost robot.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at them, sometimes they do. A couple of years ago, I had to be at the DMV, and I watched how robotic they were. It almost reminded me of an assembly line kind of thing. If you go to the Department of Social Services, you do not want a robot. You want somebody who listens to your issues, explains what you need to do to get whatever government services, and give you inspiration for a better day.
Yeah.
Does that happen all the time? No, but it does happen quietly, and there are successes.
Yeah.
No government program is going to be 100% successful. It's not like building bridges, or something like that, where you expect, okay, I'm going to spend 50 million, and this bridge is going to last 60 years. Um, you know, there's going to be failures. But I tell people the proper parallel is cancer treatment. If you had a cancer treatment that was 60% successful, you'd want people to try that, or say 70, 80%, 85% successful. You don't say, oh, we're going to chuck the program because it doesn't work for 15% people.
Yeah.
So I think we look at welfare. Oh, these people are still on welfare. Well, we don't chuck it because it's not successful for 100%. It's successful for some. It could be improved. I got to talk about one little more improvement, if I could.
Go for it.
Is in order to get cash aid, you have to be working. You have to work 30 hours a week if you're a single mom or a single dad, or be in school. But you can only get, and that we call that an educational exemption, but only for 1 year. Well, 1 year is not going to get you a certificate or something that's going to allow you to be self-sufficient. If you had a 2-year exemption, that would be great. And people say, well, that's very expensive. I often believe that maybe, hey, okay, you go on aid, we'll pay you to go 2 years to school so you can get a certificate in air conditioning repair or whatever it is, or multiple certificates so that, they're not hiring air conditioning repairmen that week. You can pick up some other kind of work. But then, okay, we'll have garnish your tax refund for 5 years.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a lot, so that there's some buy-in for the person to say, okay, well, I know that you have to do something to sell it to the conservative element in society, to say, well, why should this person get this aid and not some other hardworking American? So we have to have some mechanism by making it palatable to both sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
But that will, in the long run, make people economically self-sufficient.
Yeah.
Help more, and that's what we need. We need penny one pound foolish. If we say, okay, you only get a year exemption, that's not gonna help people much to break out of cycle poverty.
I think it's I think one of the biggest things about meeting people in the middle, whether you're on the leaning left or you lean right, center, whatever the case might be, and in a lot of regards, I do appreciate and respect the side where it is, hey, work hard, give it your best and work hard to to achieve what you are, what success looks like for you, right? Success doesn't have to be this one monetary value or this one thing to say, hey, I'm successful now because I make 6 figures, right? Or that might be good for you, but what might be good for the person down in the street who's like, hey man, success looks like to me is making 85,000 a year, and I'm good. I'm doing just fine with that. And I can do everything I need. But one of my biggest things is effort, working hard. Even and that stems a lot from the military. For me, it's just working hard, because I do have a lot of soldiers who do have this sense of entitlement and where they think they're owed these things. And when you start thinking you're owed something in talking to a person who has worked to the point to get to the point where they are, it's a little discerning when you're like, well, I'm owed this. And it's like, what do you mean you're owed this? Like, like I bust my butt to get where I am today. And, and don't get me wrong, it wasn't easy, but still I had people to back me up and help me to get where I am at today. And now that I'm what I'm at, I'm here to help you be successful, but there still requires effort on your part. There is accountability that you are still have to hold yourself accountable and making sure to help yourself to come together. But I think it's easier said than done, right? It's one of those things. It's like, it's obviously easier said than done to tell someone, hey, you're not working hard enough. And it's like, well, I'm working as hard as I can. You know what I mean? I'm doing the best that I can. And you're telling me it's still not good enough. What more do you want? You know what I mean? So it's kind of trying to be meeting people where they are, and then kind of going from there.
That's an expression we have in social, meeting people where they are.
Yeah.
Not how we would like them to be.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
where they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because final point I'll make is I have my first sergeant, and he's like the boss, like my boss. Yeah, he's my boss essentially, right? And he is 38 years old. But when it comes to physical training, and to get perspective, I'm 29 going on 30. He's 38. And he out PTs me every single day of the week. You want to talk about who can run further? He can. You want to talk about who can run faster? who maneuverability, just like all well-rounded fitness, he can. If you want to talk about who could lift more weights, sure, me, I can move a lot of heavy stuff. I'm a pretty big guy, but like if I need to move pretty quickly, oh no, he's beating me out every single time. And he'll tell me, I tell him all the time, I was like, hey, you try to push people to get to where you are, but I said it took you years to get to where you are, and you had that ambition and that drive to get to where you are. But the soldiers that we have nowadays, and it's not to disparage them in any ways, but the reality is for these soldiers is they're not where you are mentally, or where you were mentally when you decided, hey, I need to work my butt off to be in this great shape, to be in this, to reach this point of success of what I want. They don't have the same goals as you physically and mentally, or job wise. They have different goals. So to try to force on them your aspiration and your goals, it's only going to cause them to backslide, if you will, and not want them to progress, because they're like, hey, like my goal is to get a master's degree out of the army, but you want me to be a freaking physique champion, and I don't want that for myself. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
so we have two different goals, two different mindsets. So I try to tell them like, hey, it's meeting people at where they are, right? And then just proving from there. And I guarantee you, at one point, it might sink in, and where they're like, yeah, I do want to. I think I can get a little bit more shape.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things, like when I was in high school, there was required 4 years of PE. There's now in California, it's only 1 year's required.
Oh man.
And I think that I understand it because kids are just being too difficult, but or whatever. But I think that physical activity helps. There's evidence to show that physical exercise helps stave off depression, is good not only physically but mentally, and there's research to back that up.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're coming in and the recruits maybe in 2000 could do so many push-ups when they first day, but in 2024 maybe when they come in the army they can do half that many. And so to expect them to be this marathon athlete is unrealistic.
one Hundred
You want
percent.
to inspire to be as good as they can.
Yep. I tell soldiers all the time, I say, hey, all I want from you is your best. I said, I don't expect you to be me. And when I tell soldiers that, there is a sense of peace. I run. Some people don't believe me, says, but I run half marathons. I'll run my first full marathon in December of this year. Uh, Kind of looking forward to it, but I know it's going to be tiring. But I tell them, I say, I don't expect you to be me, right? Like I do what I do because it's a personal ambition and personal goal of mine. But I want you to. All I ask for you is, when we're here doing whatever the mission, operation, what we got going on, is you give me your best. And if you give me your best, look.
I tell people that I'm 65 year old, and there are 65-year-olds that can run a marathon. I'm not one of them.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know
yeah,
um and we have to accept that some people, that's the reality of some people. People say, well, you should be more, have greater work ethic. Well, by definition, most people have an average work
yeah,
ethic.
yeah.
and
100%.
and
No, go ahead. Sorry.
we need to inspire people to be, as to have some purpose in life, have goals, and to be, inspire to. And some of that, like I said in Build a Better Bridge: Social Policy for the 21st Century, there are things the government can do. It's not all the evil of everything, as some people think. There is things the government can do it better, to encourage that, but a lot of it is yourself, and how much motivation do you have, and what the influences you've had in your life.
Yeah,
Like I said, I was blessed by having a mother and father, and we went to church at least sporadically. With that so I had some breaks in my life. I grew up in an upper middle class area. That was another break.
yeah,
So yeah, it was, maybe I had it easier in that respect. Uh, but however you've been dealt, and I've seen some kids who were, I've said, hey, you were dealt a bad hand in life. Your mom's, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Your mom's got a problem with drugs, and your dad's in jail. Yeah, you've been dealt a tough deck. What do you want to do about it? I
hmm,
can't do anything about your mom and mom's drug problem. That's for her to solve. Your dad's in jail. I can't go out and release him. What are you going to do about you to be successful?
yeah,
So, like I said, I write my books. It's not lucrative. You don't make a lot of money writing books. but I do get meaning. If you're talking about, meaning in life, what am I going to do in retirement? I do want to still like move the needle a little bit, make the world a better place in some small little nook of the world. And so, I have a website, lancehillsinger.net. If you want to come and send me a message, ask me a question, if you want to go on Amazon and buy a book, that's great too. But my goal with the books and appearing on podcasts is to educate and hopefully in some small way change the system.
That's awesome. Hey guys, don't worry. All of Lance's information will be in the description. I'll have his books in the description so you can check them out. Check the link for Amazon, and then, as well as his website. So don't worry. Everything to find Lance will be in the description. Hey Lance, thank you for joining us. I appreciate you coming on the show. Hey guys, it's gonna wrap it up. Again, I'm Q, host of Mediocre Dads, where being mediocre is a choice. You have to refuse to be mediocre every single day.
Thank you for having me.